You're listening to Permission to Shine, the podcast. Stories of overcoming obstacles and finding self-empowerment with Sharice Bisram, Inner Power Activation Leader.
It's recording on my side too. It hasn't said on my bit, but I'm guessing it says it now. So I was waiting for it to say recording in progress. But never mind, we're here.
Yeah, I heard it. So it is recording.
Lovely. Okay. Amazing. Okay. Well, hi, everyone. I am really excited to introduce to you a long lost friend. And through the internet and the power of social media, I have reconnected with the amazing Lee Duncan. So, hi, Lee. Thank you so much for joining me. I would love for you to introduce yourself and everything that you do now.
Sure. Yeah, just following on from that, it has been a while. I think almost 10 years. I was discussing with a friend earlier today, actually, and told him that I was coming on the podcast. So yeah, very insightful stuff. So my name's Lee Duncan. I am a former professional boxer, master's graduate from university, which is, my little claim to fame, as they say. And now I'm a aspiring entrepreneur. I try and be the best version I can be. I'm big on personal development, and that's what actually directed me into working around mindset. And following on from the boxing, which was the reason I mentioned that, was I learned a lot through the game of boxing and being a professional athlete for many years. And I've carried that through to personal projects that I've had set up now for a while. And we set up an online university as well, which is a personal passion of mine. And that's what I've got my head into at the moment, apart from a few other pies as well. But I think we'll predominantly revolve this conversation around that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think what's amazing, I think for both of us, is that we were both doing something like sports or performance related. Because obviously for you being a boxer at the time when I met you, I was a professional dancer at the time as well. So I feel like there's like a synchronicity with the work that we did in regards to obviously our mindset, that drive and determination that you need in order to pursue something that's outside of the box, really. And I think the way that we've probably both found our way to this space has probably been similar in a lot of ways. And I'd love for you to kind of go on that journey and a little bit further back. So if you could start with maybe how you got into doing boxing and a bit of your life story, really, into how you got into this space now.
Sure. So just roll back a fair few years now. Grew up in a house, had two brothers, mum and dad. Great family life, great upbringing as a child. Nothing sort of wrong on that side of things. I was a pretty active young kid early on. My mother took me to karate lessons at the ripe age of like 6, so I was always active, should I say. School, when I got into school, I really just sort of switched off. That's what it was. The first year was really exciting and everybody's like, it's a new thing and you're just sort of getting into your maturity. And I just tended to switch off after a couple of years. So then that left me sort of feeling lost in that sense, where I could never find the momentum. And one thing I was always sort of doing and manifesting in the background, excuse me, was being a professional boxer. That's what I wanted to do. So long behold, the manifestation started to become real, because that's when I actually got introduced to boxing, was the second stage of my secondary school years. And I met a fantastic mentor named Brendan Ingle, who took me under his wing. And I ended up moving out of my family home at the age of 16, lived with other professionals as well. And then that's where my career started to take off. And that's where my life changed. But I know when people mention when your life changes, there's always something which is the prerequisite to that, which is a shift internally. And for us to get a shift internally, it either takes a challenge, some kind of trauma or something to really shake you and wake you up. And it's that moment where you think, it's just the penny's dropped now. And there's no going back from who you were to who you want to become. And that's when it all changed for me. So yeah, that is an overview of my early childhood and how that started and where my life sort of suddenly changed and the journey began, more or less, when I was sort of 16, 17.
I love that. And at that time, I mean, you said that you had that manifestation, that dream that you wanted to be a professional boxer.
Yeah.
What was the inspiration for that? Because was it just that you watched it on TV, or was there something more at that time for you?
So I spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house every other weekend, and I loved it there because, I got a little bit of freedom to run around and do what I want, as my nan and granddad were very sort of kind of laid back approach compared to my father, who was very strict. So I used to go there every weekend, and my granddad was a big, big boxing fan as well as a big football fan. So every time he had the boxing, I used to watch it, and I used to just get up and mimic the moves. And it was just something that gave me adrenaline, something that, fit and was concurrent with my vision. Um, and then from there, I just used to think about it the whole time. Anything I did, whatever I do, I would just think boxing, boxing. And it's crazy because when you focus on something, you start to see it everywhere.
Mm.
And, the reticular activator system actually picks that up over time. So everything you start to notice is what we focus on, right? As you know that in your work. So it directed me to that path, and I thought, this is my path, and this is what I should be doing. When you get that feeling and that internal feeling that something's right, and your gut instinct's always telling you and navigating you to that point, whatever you do, then yeah, that's what happened.
Yeah, I love that. And I think we can't disregard that feeling of having a dream. I think when you're younger, it's almost squashed out of you a little bit, isn't it? Like they're like, oh, you've got to do something. Like for me, I used to get told all the time, when are you going to get a normal job? Or, oh, that's a bit far-fetched. Like people didn't actually believe that I could pursue a dance career. And I just wonder, for me, that was really a drive to keep pushing forward. And I'm guessing it must have been a similar situation for you.
Yeah, absolutely. And I get that, and I get where you come from. Just like when you got into dancing, you did it because it felt right. You probably we do things for a feeling. That's the bottom line of why we do things that we do. There's always a feeling that it gives us at the end of that. So whatever feeling you get is what is addictive and why we keep going back. So yeah, that's what sort of got me into boxing. And in school, I used to tell people, I want to be a boxer when I grow up, but that's what I want to do. Again, I wasn't interested in anything else because my belief system wasn't, constructed around anything that I was doing at that time. So unbeknown to me, now looking back, there was mental restrictions around my own limiting beliefs at that time, but you're too young to understand at the time. So I was very limited in my self-belief. There was not much belief around what I could do because I was unaware. I wasn't really exposed to anything that was out of the ordinary. So everything ordinary just seemed, mainstream, and that's what you did and that's who you were. But I always thought, no, I want to go on and do a little bit more. So it all started from there, and that's when it really sort of took off. And yeah, I mean, I see friends now that I went to school with, and they're like, oh, I wish I'd have boxed. I wish I'd have got into something. I wish I'd have done this. And, I think the bottom line, you've really just got to take action and really go for what you believe in your dream.
Yeah, I agree. I think for me, mine was definitely from a result of trauma and wanting to prove myself. But I'm guessing for you, it was that inspiration, like you said, and that feeling to do more and to keep pushing forward, which was amazing. And I think for you, being surrounded in that camp, like you said, with other boxers, I can only imagine how magical that experience was for a young aspiring boxer to be surrounded by other people that also have the same dream. It's almost like you were lifting each other up. Like, was that the way it went, or was it the opposite when you were competing for something?
No, so like your peer group is going to fast track where you want to go. So you've got to be around a specific peer group that is really going to challenge you every day. So what it was for me and what I've learned about myself over the years, I'm someone who loves adrenaline. So I need that kick. I need that adrenaline push. When I go to something ordinary and basic, I don't get a kick out of it. There's no energy behind it. So in order to create energy, I need adrenaline. In order for me to get the adrenaline fix, I need a bit of a challenge. In order to get that challenge, you've got to get uncomfortable. So every day I went into the boxing club, it was all of that packed in one, you know. And again, living with other athletes, you've got to surround yourself with the people on a similar, if not similar, the same mission as you, because again, that is really going to excel the speed that you get there on what you want to do. So, you know, before I was living with them, it was like different conversations you'd have with ordinary people who didn't understand. When you was living with pro fighters, and I was only boxing amateur at the time because I was still 16, I wasn't even old enough to turn pro. So by surrounding yourself with world champions who were talking about, oh, you should win this competition coming up, you should win the ABA or whatever, it was like that was the language, that was the expectation. So I knew every time I went out to box, the expectation was these guys are expecting me to win the whole competition, never mind this one bout. So there's a change in trajectory of expectation.
Absolutely. You know what's really nice to hear as well is this that sportsmanship in a really healthy way. I think that in the dance industry, it's a little bit different to that. Like especially when I was training or when I was in dance schools and things like that, there was always competition. You were always told that only a few people make it, only a few people make it. So that's the make or break, I think, in that moment is, are you going to fight and go for it, or are you going to let that take you out of something that you're really passionate about? Second, that winning mentality of actually achieving something, how did that show in your life outside of boxing? Because obviously I felt like as a performer I was separate to who I was as a person. So what does that look like for you?
So I adopted the identity of an athlete. So when we have identity is the strongest force that governs us as people, right? So if you're a basketballer, but you see yourself as a footballer, it's going to be very hard to play basketball because it's not your identity, right? So the first thing we got to establish is, what is our identity? My identity, I knew who I was. That was easy for me in regards to, okay, I'm just going to box. And then my trainer came up to me one day and he was like, look, I know you come into the gym now, you're in the flow of things. Have you ever thought about going to university? And I was like, I did, but I just saw it a little bit out of reach at that time because it's just academia was something I was so far behind on coming up in school because like I said, I switched off. But then with the winning mentality that kicked in from boxing and the momentum I got and the self-belief that started to grow, I thought, you know what? Why not? Why not test myself? Again, another challenge. So then I got into college and then I ended up getting the grades and I went to uni and everything else. And, you know, that side of academia then took off from there. But in regards to having a healthy space and healthy competition, yes, it's healthy. Don't get me wrong. As soon as you got in the boxing club and everyone, you know, sparred together and everything else, it was competitive because you need that when you want to aspire to world honors. You need competition and you need good collaboration because without competition, we're not tested. We're not you know, there's no fire. And you need that fire, especially in sport and especially in a sport like, you know, full contact sport like boxing.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah, absolutely. And I would even say that as a performer as well, I think if you haven't got that determination to make it, you
Mm-hmm.
just won't. You know, like I always said to everyone, I will continue to dance as long as I'm passionate about it. You know, that was for me the most important thing, was that if I loved it, and you know, even teaching dance was something I absolutely loved. And I thought, I'm going to keep doing this until really quite recently in June this year was when I was like, no, do you know what? I'm done. I don't feel it anymore. And I happily just took my hands off of the steering wheel of that. And I was like, cool, another car now. I'm driving something else instead now. And it's yeah, a really beautiful practice. But obviously with everything, the highs are really high and amazing. But what did the lows look like for you?
You know, to be fair, I haven't had any low points. I mean, I think everybody experiences something that they don't like in life, right? Like some people like tea, some people like coffee, other people don't like coffee, other people don't like tea. So it's a matter of how you interpret your loss. Like some people will see, okay, I lost, I'm going to come back and I'm going to be better. Some people lose and they're like, oh my God, that's inflicted my self-worth. Now I'm no longer worth it. And it can be a downward spiral from there. And that's where people end up falling into the trap of, oh, because again, my identity is attached to that thing. And now that thing no longer exists like I expected it to in my own model and perception of the world. Now my self-worth is intact with that. So now it's absolutely, destroyed. So I think that's the wrong outlook to look at it. But I think one of my lowest points was when I lost the fight and having to like walk back in the gym, and you start to think, oh, everybody's looking at you, everybody's laughing at you. Did people see it? And like when you're from a place like Sheffield, the city, it is a city, but it's a village more than it's a large village. So in the sport of boxing, everybody knows everybody. So it's like when you got published in a newspaper and you lost a fight, you'd think, oh, everybody's laughing, everybody's talking about, everybody's going to see it. So sometimes it can really hold again, another limiting belief in your head, how you're perceiving things. So that can really damage you from a mental standpoint. So it took a lot of reprocessing and reprogramming to go through that and actually say, look, my identity is a fighter, but my identity is not attached to, the level of result that I can get because I'm still Lee as a person. So we're going to have ups and downs. So if we're tied to those ups and downs forever, we're going to be yo-yoing up in mood. So as I thought, and I figured, as long as I keep my self-worth high in any circumstance, in any situation, everything eventually will have to rise up and meet it anyway. So I'll be good either way.
Yeah, that's such a healthy way to look at things as well, because I definitely feel like I was, again, I think because I'd had so much trauma growing up as well, I
Yeah.
really did embed my self-worth into being a dancer. So for
Yeah.
me, I took everything so personally because, again, I funneled everything I was into that space to be seen. And I used it as a coping mechanism to hide really and stop so I didn't have to heal, basically. And obviously you don't know any of that when you're that age, but it's really nice to hear that you were aware of that and that was something you were actively working on. And I wonder where that came from for you. Was that shown to you by your coaches, or was that something in your family that was a healthy mentality?
Look, one time I was sat at home after I'd lost a fight and I was feeling low, and then I was like, oh, for God's sake. And like a couple of days before that, I'd failed my driving test as well. So I was like, it was a double low. And I know they're only small things in comparison now, but looking back, you felt so low. It was like, oh, for God's sake, how am I going to come back? How am I going to ever feel good again? So one day, my trainer called me to the gym, and then he actually stood me in the middle of the gym and he got everyone to stand around, and he had me explain what I was feeling. He had me explain why I'm down. But the whole purpose he did that was to show that in perspective, it's nothing. It's just a glitch in the journey, and you can get over it pretty easy and pretty quickly. So that was how I started to learn to think, okay, we've just got to get up and go again. You've just got to keep showing up. So yeah, that's where that came from. And it was actually, having the losses in life and having the failures where you start to recalibrate on how you're going to come back. And that's when you start to realize, sorry, that's the auto light. That's when you start to realize that it's not the end of the road, it's just a glitch in the journey.
Yeah, absolutely that. And I think it's so wonderful that you've had such a healthy male role model in your life, because so many men don't have access to this, and then they're carrying out these traits because they're trying to search for something outside of themselves. And I know that a lot of women that listen to this podcast either have sons or something like that,
Yeah.
and people ask me a lot of the time, what do I work with boys and men? And my answer is no, because I believe that men need a strong male role model. They just do, right? And I think that it's wonderful to hear firsthand from you how that's played such a massive impact in your life.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I know many people grow up with, like when you told a bit of your story yourself, grow up without a parent or one or the other or whatever. I was very fortunate to have both my parents, my grandparents, and everything else. So I had the male structure there, and plus I had a mentor as well. So it was like times three that got me out of that. Maybe if, a male figure was missing in my life, maybe it would have been a lot different. I don't know. Maybe it would, maybe it wouldn't. But I always believe no matter what or who you've got, that's your family. So your family are always going to back you regardless. Your family are always going to tell you what you want to hear, basically, because they don't want to see you upset. But a mentor, the difference with a mentor is it's usually someone who's walked a similar path that you want to go down, and they can direct you away from the landmines that are hidden beneath the floor. And that is the power of a mentor. So I always say to everybody, like when they come on to me and say, "Oh, what's your advice?" I say, "Okay, what does your life look like? Are you doing what you've wanted to do? Have you ever achieved anything that you want to achieve? Have you ever fulfilled anything you've wanted to fulfill, or gone down that avenue?" And if they say no, it's because you don't have a mentor. That's the bottom line. There's no other way around it. There's no other way you can figure it out. If you haven't done it and you've been wanting to do it for so much time and you haven't, the answer is you need to go out and find a mentor to help you do that. And especially if you're a male and you didn't have a father figure growing up, you won't realize the implication of that till later on in life, when you've got childhood, you can say the traumas, experiences, or whatever, they're actually going to come out and play out later on in your adult life. So you've got to really deal with those through mentorship and development.
Yeah, 100%. I could have said it better myself. And I think, I guess for both of us, we're both being, either what we needed or what we saw growing up. So then we can support the people that also need our help, which is just so important with all of that. And I also want to highlight the benefit of, sports and extracurricular activities, because I know for me, dance was something that I had as a routine. So I knew that I was going to go there every week so that I can get out of whatever chaos was happening at home, but also having spaces like you were saying where people were similar to me in terms of dancing, moving their bodies, different people to talk to as well, other than the same group, the same thing. I just want to reiterate that because, again, for parents listening, or just women or anyone listening, really, to be honest, like having something that is outside of either what's normal or your 9 to 5, your job, whatever it is, something extra where your body and your mind is stimulated. I think you just can't, it's second to none, isn't it? I would shake that into people. Like, you need something else. You can't just do like 9 to 5 basic life. There needs to be something where you move your body, even if it's running, whatever it is for you, your body needs that, right? It needs that release.
Yeah, you need it, and it's healthy. That's first and foremost. And yeah, you need a heart and mind harmonic outlet. That's what I call it. So, if you're into your personal development, you should read, you should do your breath work. There's not a one size fits all. I'm not saying you should do this.
Absolutely.
In a routine. But what I found over myself that helps me reset is when I get up in the morning, I'll do a little bit of breath work, not much, just something to get me, get me thinking, get me moving. And then I'll hit the gym, I'll have a sauna, and I'm ready for the day. Like, I can go and smash the day. So if you don't have that, and if you roll out of bed, you have a fry up, you watch Jeremy Kyle, and you watch the news that is talking about problems that, are going to put on top of your problems that you've already got in life. That's the last thing you want. So if you've got plenty of problems, the last thing you want to do is be watching the news that are going to inflict more problems on you that you can't do anything about, that your dad's uncle's auntie's nephew's cousin his cat has got run over. It's nothing to do with you. It's not relevant. So what I'm saying here is people need to cut out the distractions and all the noise and the nonsense, and they need to focus and key in and cue in on what they need to do to move the needle of life forward. Other than that, if you are focused on the things that are irrelevant, like the news, like a bad diet, like toxic interactions and newspapers and everything else and everything between, it is going to start to affect you mentally. So I always say, if you are struggling with mental health, the first thing you should strip away is anything that can inflict your mental state. And until that point, you're gonna recycle the experiences, and you'll recycle the same lessons until you learn.
Absolutely, that I couldn't agree more. And I don't think I've really ever watched the news, to be honest. I think that it was something that I'd been doing for a long time. And it was really funny because my friends always used to call me a conspiracy theorist because I didn't watch the news. They're like, well, how do you know what's going on in the world? I'm like, why do I need to know about another conflict, another bad situation when all I can ever control is myself? I'm just going to keep pouring into me, and
Right.
then everything else doesn't matter. But what you were saying there, I always say like 1% every day of something that's going to get you in the right direction that's the trajectory of success, right? It's like that little thing that comes back to you. I think we're conditioned to think that everything we want is outside of ourselves. And I think that, when we turn our vision inwards, that's where, again, I think what you were saying about manifestation before, it's like so within, so without. So how you feel about yourself is what will be projected outwards, right? And I feel like that's been my lessons over and over again.
Yeah, exactly. So it's, in contrary to this, Cherie. So someone asked me the other day, oh, you don't like the news, don't you care about what's going on? And I'm like, well, it's not that. It's the fact that, one, if I was to sit here and say, guess what my dad's brother's cousin's best friend is having for dinner tonight, is that relevant? It's not relevant to you. Regardless of what you think, it's never going to be relevant in your life. So you don't need to know that. And another reason is you don't make someone better. If someone's depressed, I'm not going to go to the hospital and say, well, I'll get depressed as well, and then we'll both feel better. No.
Yeah.
Be the example or be the invitation to change. And I always say, be the invitation to change, because then you can start to lift others up. It's like we've conditioned to feel bad if we don't donate to every charity we see. If you have no money, why would you put yourself in a circumstance where you're donating something that you don't have and put yourself in a worse situation that you're never going to be able to help the people even close to you? So my point is, don't fall victim to the conditioning of the mainstream if you're not in a position to make valuable decisions that's going to add value to your life. I always say, get in a position where you can call a few shots, and then you can do all that business later on. It's always going to be there.
Yeah, for sure.
So
Absolutely. And I think for women as well, especially, like, we're conditioned to be people pleasers, like, got to put yourself last, you do everything for everyone else. And that's a lot of what I teach as well, is like the boundary thing, exactly what you're talking about, us not watching the news, not interacting in conversations that are toxic. Like, I often change the subjects. Like, if I walk into a room with my family and they're talking about something that I don't particularly like, gossip or something like that, I'm like,
yeah,
we're not going to talk about that now. And they're like, oh, and then at first, obviously, there's a lot of push and pull with that. And now they're like, yeah, you're right. I see what I'm doing, and I've changed that nature now. And all my friends as well. I mean, you lose people along the way, like, that's absolutely a given. But again, like you were saying, that support team around you, you want to be lifting each other up as you get to where you want to be. I don't think I always say, like, it's almost like you're a speedboat, you're cruising along the ocean. If you're dragging along a pirate ship, it's going to slow you down, so you have to cut the tires, right? And I think that's something scary. But I think a lot of what we're talking about is doing the things that people don't traditionally do to have a life that people don't traditionally have, right? So I think that, what we're talking about specifically is like success driven people, or people that are aspiring for that. It's these changes that are fundamental, isn't it, to creating that?
fundamental. You said a few key words there, and one was people pleasing, Cherise. So this is a big problem in human nature, and there's a time and a place for people pleasing. And it's usually on stage if you are performing like yourself. You've got to please the crowd who have bought a ticket to come and watch you. That's fair enough. As a sportsman, you had to please the crowd in order for them to come and watch you, right? Because they paid good money. But there comes a time where when you are afraid to say no, what you're actually afraid of is that person rejecting you, then you feel that you're not validated. So then you feel that your self-worth, again, like we spoke about earlier, decreases, right? So sometimes you've got to learn to say no if it's not always in the best interest of yourself. I'm not saying never, but I'm saying in that present moment, the decision might be better for the both of you to say no, or for yourself or for your well-being to actually say no to someone, regardless of how close they are to you. I've been in a position where I've had to say no. Oh, can you help me move tomorrow? Well, no, I can't. Can you help me do this on this date? No, I can't. It doesn't mean no, never. It just means not right now. And I think once you can establish that and you lose the scarcity mentality of you having trouble dealing with being rejected for somebody because your self-esteem is so low anyway, you're scared that it's gonna, really sort of come to the surface, then you're onto a winner.
Yeah, I completely agree with you. And I think, people are scared to be the villain, aren't they? They're scared to be a villain in someone else's story. So they'll do whatever they can to be liked and to be nice because that's what they feel like they should be. But actually, setting a boundary doesn't make you a horrible person. It actually makes you a better person because then again, like we were saying, you lead by example. So then the next time round, if someone can't do something, they can say no as well. It creates that permission slip, doesn't it, to be able to do that? And actually, it's something I do without thinking now. Like I noticed, a few times I've got family that have gone to the airport or a friend that needed a lift to the airport. But because I was so busy on that day, I was like, no, I'm really sorry. I don't have the capacity. And instead of there being like a big commotion, it was just a very clear comment. And then that person's like, yeah, cool, no worries. It's quite simple. I think we make it a big deal, right? Like we were saying, those limiting beliefs and the self-sabotaging thoughts almost create a big scenario. And actually it's very easy. I think that we perpetuate our own villain in our own mind, and actually I'm okay with being a villain now. So if someone wants to perceive me as one for having a boundary, then that's on them, it's not on me.
Yeah, and boundaries are healthy because, like you said, it can spawn into something that is huge when it's just a simple mechanism to say, no, I can't do it. Oh, why? Well, that's up to you. And if you want to explain yourself or justify it, then you can go out of your way and do that. If not, sometimes I say, I'm not here to justify myself. It's like, I was in the cinema a few weeks ago and someone was behind me and they was like, oh, can you move seats because I can't see behind you? I said, no, because I'm comfortable. Like, no, I'm not going to like cut up all my stuff and finally like sometimes, and I didn't care if I was a people pleaser. I would have been running around that cinema trying to find a seat, sweating, not enjoyed the movie, and it would have ruined my night. So, like, just by saying no and leaving it at that, and not even expecting or have the expectation of giving a justification for it, it was cool. Like,
but also that's a them problem too, right? They can't see, they move, right? That's not on you to have to move.
Look, however they wanted to perceive it, and the reason I'm actually telling you this is I find so many people in that circumstance, and I'm not saying never help anyone out. Absolutely not. If you're there and you can help, go and help. Like, absolutely. There's people that have helped me in life. I get that. But they've also said no to me. But then that's on me because I've had the courage to ask. And if they've said no, I've been like, oh, no, no worries. You ask someone else. And your perseverance to go and find that help is down to you. Then it's not their problem if like.
Yeah, absolutely. And I actually, in my own life, I think that I was conditioned to do that, to be there for everyone else because of like my childhood experiences. So I went out of my way to make sure everyone was safe, everyone was happy, everyone, all of these things, and made myself really small. So then when I did start to set boundaries and it became a problem to people, what actually started to happen is as a result of me not doing the thing that I always did, they had to find their own solutions, which inevitably helped them more because then they were able to become resourceful rather than me just doing everything for them, which was a really healthy thing that I realized I'd enabled and sort of disabled them from being able to figure that out for themselves by people pleasing. So this is why it's a really important thing, right?
That's huge what you've just said. Like, you've wiped the floor with that because no one can help you if you don't want to help yourself. Like, it's just a vicious cycle. So we're going back to the board here. When people are crying out for help and there's free resources, there's information embedded online, you can go and access this information. You can go and access people, tools. It doesn't cost anything. It just costs you, well, it costs you a little bit of time, but if you're willing to put the time in, it will save you acres of time down the line, right? And if that person is still complaining about the same thing in a year's time or 2 years' time, and they've done nothing to move forward and nothing to help themselves, I don't have any sympathy for that because then you start to learn that it's programming and it's self-inflicted. It's just
Mm.
cry out for, well, I need help. I have mental health, but okay, what have you done about it? What changes have you made? Like all these questions. And when you ask a quality question is the same as the steering wheel of the mind, because in order for us to progress forward, we have to ask ourselves, well, how do we do this? Not, oh, that's me done, I'm finished, this is not going to work. No, how do I make it work? How do I get the information? How do I access the right people? How do I go through the right channels? So, yeah, like going back to what you said, I think it is a big topic.
Yeah, definitely. And especially what you just said there about people not wanting to help themselves. I find that such a massive thing. And, you know, a lot of the time as well, to these people, it's so subconscious. They don't even realize that they've been ingrained to think that way, that people need to save them, people need to help them. Without your support, they're not going to survive. You're not responsible for anyone else but yourself. So again, like in those situations where people are struggling, I've had to say a few times to people, like, you can't keep coming to me, especially this was a friendship thing as well. You can't keep coming to me for advice when this is now what people pay me for, and you're not going to take my advice and then not do what I'm telling you to do. So now I actually don't have these conversations with my friends. All of the friends I have, we're all in like a similar space, or if we do share a conversation like this, it's a very mutual exchange of, oh, that's a good idea, how about this instead? And I think that, yeah, that's the evolutionary piece that happens, I guess, when you do invest into yourself. And again, personal development is a key thing, key part of all of my friends, whether it's a big heavy thing that they do and they're really pushing for, or it's just a subconscious thing that they listen to a podcast every couple of days or whatever. I think there's some sort of glimmer of that in the people around me for sure. But
Yeah.
I would love to know how you evolved out of boxing into the space you're in now, because obviously it's very clear that this has always been a part of your story. You've always been into personal development, but I'd love to know what that shift was for you.
My shift is, just to be openly, is I always keep my self-worth high now, regardless of anything, you know, regardless of how you feel, what you have, what you're doing. Like my self-worth is always high because I know the external follows the internal. It's not the other way around. It's not chase the external and hopefully our internal will rise in satisfaction. No, you get the internal right, the external starts to construct itself magically or manifestationally or law of attraction or law of action itself. So that's what I've learned over time. Personal development wise, I got into personal development whilst still boxing, because boxing, again, it works on certain elements and certain parts of you from an internal standpoint, but I wanted to take it further. So I started studying people like, you know, Jim Rohn, Simon Sinek, and then you just start to come across certain people like Earl Nightingale and all these very successful mentors. And I just started taking in this knowledge, and it's something that I just instinctively found interesting and that I started to resonate with. And every time I go back to certain reads or books now, I find something different and something else that I've learned that's new. So it's an ongoing process. We're always learning. And anybody that tells you that they know it all, I'm afraid is lying, right? Because
Yeah.
we're always learning. So I did that, and then I started going to my first events back in 2017. And then every year I was going to these events, just getting out of my comfort zone, networking, you know, and it was the same conversations, and, you know, it was up my street. And again, it's something that I'm always progressing to just be the best version that we can always be. And again, I had the fortunate position of going to the Tony Robbins event last year, which was actually on my vision board and down as one of my goals, to sit front row at a Tony Robbins event. And I remember first seeing Tony Robbins on a Netflix documentary years ago. It was called I Am Not Your Guru. I don't know if you've heard of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's when I first came across Tony Robbins, actually, back then. And I thought, wow, these events look amazing. So, you know, I wrote down on my goals, where I do my goals every night, and I said, you know, I want to sit front row at Tony Robbins event. Anyway, that happened last year. And again, that was another level in regards to life-changing stuff. So yeah, it's just spawned from that journey, just finding it. And like I said, going back to the beginning of the call when I said, when you look for something, you always find it, because then you're focused on that specific entity that you're looking for.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that's something I drill into people all the time, is that if you write your goals down, it just makes them tangible. Because I think all the time they're in your mind, and it's really important, obviously, to visualize on them as well. But when they're written down, it's like, oh, this is a contract to myself to say, this is what's possible. This is what I can bring in. And I've had similar experiences myself, even down to this year going to LA, and then I got to deliver one of my sessions out there. And I think that I just wrote down at the start of the year, LA again, because I'd been and I wanted to move there as a dancer. So to go out there and to now do this work that I'm doing, that was a really lovely full circle for me to be able to see this in real life. And I think yeah, we probably both have that same thing about, see it and like you believe it, right? And then you see it, and it's one of those things, isn't it, that our mind has so much power. And that's something that obviously is very clear in your belief as well. And I think that that is really the secret to life, is to understand that we have more power than we have, anything else. And when we can tap into that, we're limitless.
Yeah, so like when you said tap into that, I've come across, I don't want to get off subject, but just to mention it, that in the secret societies, which I'm qualified to actually say this because they're not actually secret. Everybody knows about secret societies and everything else, and people are, what is it? Is it just like sci-fi stuff or whatever? No, it's a real thing, but they're just called secret societies, but they each have individual names, which I'm not really going to get into. But let's just think of it like this way: they're not secret, but what they teach in them is very hidden and very secret. Okay. And one of the things they teach in secret societies is how to manifest an internal shift. And like you said, whatever you are in tune with, meaning whatever you think about most of the time and how you're trained to think, your actions and your cells will start to convert and conform to how you think, because it's a feeling. Like I said, the whole universe as a whole listens to how we feel, not what we want, because most of the people, and what is actually taught in the secret societies, is never say this is what I want, because all you're telling yourself in a contract is I don't have it. Therefore, if you're thinking I don't have it, you'll never get it, because it's like, oh, I want a relationship. I want a relationship. Usually you see those people years down the line, they're still saying the same thing, because it's like, I want it. So they've already sort of distinguished to themselves they don't have it, so they're going to get more of what they don't have. So that shift internally, and yeah, I can shove secret societies to one side now, but that shift is what they teach. You have to shift your frame of thinking in proportion to what you're attempting to manifest in your life and everything that comes with it. And before you know it, you start to come across certain people. You start to come across, like, I use some of the skills taught in those societies, and I know it sounds a little bit hairy-fairy, and that's what I exactly thought when I was introduced to some of the stuff, but it actually works. And I've tried it and attempted it too many times for it not to work, and it works. So there you go.
Oh, Lee, I'm a woo woo gal, so you can go full in with that with me, because yeah, that's exactly what I do with my clients too, is like using visualization to be able to tap into it, to feel it, see it tangibly in our mind, to then know that that is possible. Like I'm very much into that, very, very tapped into that for sure. And I think it's really great that we're talking about it, because again, it's just reiterating to people that this is all possible for you. It's these small shifts. And when you get out of that frequency of that lack, or seeing what you don't have and just starting to see what you do, even like, I mean, I'm sure you're exactly the same as me, as in teaching gratitude is like the key to shift everything, because you can't be grateful for something and sad at the same time. It just doesn't work.
No, it is. And again, like the mind can only focus on one thing. The mind can't focus on 50 different things, because when people say I'm a multitasker, it just means that they're going like that with the needle point in every different direction. You can only focus on one thing. So again, if we're focused on stress, if we're focused on depression, if we're focused on, all the bad stuff, that is what you will manifest in regards to how the laws of the universe works in regards to a third dimension or fourth dimension consciousness that you can't see. And deep within your subconscious mind is working, just like when you're asleep and you digest food. You're not consciously aware of it, but it's still happening. And it's the same thing with your cells. Whatever environment you're going in, whether you want to solve a problem, like I've come across people who said, well, they've got mental health problems. Yeah, I mean, I'm not qualified to speak on this unless it's not trauma driven. So if it's trauma driven, I'm not qualified at all. No, it's not my remit. Subtle mental health issues where people have told themselves that story where they start to believe it, then yes. So if you are stating and making that statement to yourself, you have a mental health issue because you can't get out of your own mind, and you're going down to the pub and sinking 6 pints with a load of other people who are sinking 6 pints and talking about the same thing, but not doing anything to move the needle forward. So in retrospect, you have to know how to have a plethora of tools at your disposal to be able to get to where you want to get to. And without that, and without the expertise of from a mentor or a coach like yourself, I know you do coaching, Sharice, right? So you're
well, I like to call myself a mentor as well.
mentor, yeah. So exactly. And if they have a mentor, they need guides, because it's some of the stuff so advanced that, like I said about the manifesting, everybody manifests in life. They just don't know what they're doing. Like when I was boxing, certain things that I was always thinking about, really I was manifesting, but I just didn't know what I was doing.
Yeah.
And the fact of the matter is, in the secret societies, they teach this very early on. So the people who come through them already know from a very young age how manifestation and visualization works in regards to how their cells and their cell inertia and their subconscious will be rewired in regards to the thoughts that they think most of the time. I hope that makes sense, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you're basically saying what I say in your words, which is amazing, because then the listeners already know this stuff, and it's just nice to hear it again reiterated in a different way, which is so important. And I think, I talk a lot about that subconscious like programming, that code that we've all been like subject to in some form of a way. And I think that depending on what you've gone through in your life will give you a different version of that. But everything we're saying is that it doesn't matter what's happened in your life. You have the capacity to be able to change that frequency, but you have to consciously trust yourself to be able to get you to that point, which is, so fundamental. And I think this is everything that we're both talking about in our own works, that this is why this is so important. And on that, I'd love for you to go into Mindset University and sort of talk to us about how that works, how people can join, all of the things.
Sure, yeah. So we help people eradicate fear, and because eventually if you don't deal with fear, it then spawns into insecurity, and then insecurity holds you back from going for the goals that you wanted to go for initially. So that's why you've probably ended up at Mindset University, because you've realized the block was the insecurity that's held you back from reaching your goal, right? So that's just to keep it simple. So we have an online university for people to attend to do that. And, we've got a 95% success rate. There's a bunch of testimonials, and we have a very succinct formality for people to follow that will actually get them out of that space and into a whole new way of thinking.
Yeah, amazing. So how does it work? Is it like an online platform? How does that look?
Yeah, because we want to reach as many people as possible who are very specific for Mindset University. So by having a platform and an online portal that they can access, they've got courses on there that's gonna help them break out of that cycle. They can have one-to-one with me and our mentors. So it's just a plethora of expertise to get you from A to make sure you're on the right track and going towards that goal that you never did because you didn't have the courage or the know-how to break out of those limiting beliefs. Just like I was when I was at school. I was riddled in limiting beliefs, like I got into earlier on in the conversation. I didn't really know how to break out of it. And it wasn't until I got a mentor that the game changed for me. So my advice would be, I'm not saying come to Mindset University, but to anybody out there, go and find yourself a mentor, because it's a very good start and it's a very good starting point. I mean, hold my hands up. Like, a lot of people think of like the cost element of investing in a mentor with your monetary value. If you're thinking that way, that signals to me straight away that you have a scarcity mindset that you need a mentor if that's the way you think, because the long haul cost of not investing into a mentor greatly outweighs what it would cost you early on. It's going to cost you a lot more in relationships, careers, on your potential, on what you could reach, and everything in between, like along the journey. So that's what I definitely preach for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Amen. I agree. And I think, what's really important to go off of what you've said there is that we only know what we know. So it's important that we invest in people that know what we don't know, so then we can excel and grow. Because what I know for sure is, even in my own patterns with my family and generational lineage, is that, it wasn't the way I would have liked things to have gone. But I understand now that people were doing the best they could with what they knew. And when you know that part, you give it grace and you move forward. And then you know for yourself, like I looked at my own life and I thought, right, what do I want to do differently now? Because I already proved to people that I could be a dancer. But the next stage for me was to really heal these wounds that had been repeating over and over again through my generations. So, I really did take that on board and dive into that part and invest in mentors and invest in myself and my growth. And it's something that, like you said, in between here, is that, it's a continuous journey that we're constantly evolving, and every level there'll be another devil and something we have to work through. But again, like you said, having the tools to be able to manage those things, which is what you teach, which is what I teach, and we figure that out for ourselves. When you have a toolkit, you're never going to fall again to as low as you've ever been, because you know how to get yourself back up. And I think that for me is what resilience really is having that ability to get back up again every time you fall.
100%. And like I said, even though you might not want to, even though you feel ridiculed, even though you feel low at the time, if you can show up every day, you're always going to get there. You're always going to get somewhere. You're always going to get to a better place than you were. So, that's what I always say. And it's like, I'll give you an example. When you said there's stuff that we never know, there's stuff that we don't know. So when I'm in my local leisure club, or I'm in the sauna, or I'm just having general chit chat with, some other members of the public or whatever, they say certain things, or they ask me why I do certain things. And I'm like, well, to me, it's normal, because I've grown up around world-class athletes that know stuff about health and fitness that keep them on top of their game, that the general public or mainstream don't know, because it's hidden to give them a competitive edge, right? Which makes total sense. But it's something that I've picked up over time, that I've then learned and embodied, that keeps me, in great shape and great health and everything else. So my point is, until you are exposed and you grow your level of awareness, you are not going to know what you don't know. And if you know it and you're not doing it, it means that you're not knowing it. Because if you knew it, you'd be doing it, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely. That 100% that. And even, yeah, just to go back to, I think you said it the last time around, was about the cost, like the cost of staying the same is far greater than the cost of transformation. And I think that that's something that I want to repeat again, just because I know that so many people are dancing around this edge, because again, it's not taught to us enough to invest in yourself, is it? Like we get told to go to university and do a degree and do all these things, and we're using the government's money to do that, so it's not coming out of our own pocket. But there's something wonderful that happens with that exchange of paying your own money and saying to the universe, or whatever it is you believe in, that I'm worth this. And it's like giving that real big exchange of, this is what's next for me. I'm worthy of this space and this time. So I think I just wanted to highlight that again. But
Yeah.
where can people find you, Lee, if they want to speak to you, if they want to find you, if they want to do Mindset University? I will put all the links below, but just for anyone listening that's driving or anything like that.
So yeah, my Mindset University is connected at the moment to my personal page on Instagram. Best way to reach out to me is via, DM on Instagram. So yeah, Lee Duncan 305 on Instagram. You'll catch me there. That's my mainly used platform, and that's where, most of my people who we work with reach out to me. So yeah, I find that as a valued and reliable channel.
Yeah, nice. No, thank you. And thank you for sharing your expertise and like this winning mentality that you have. I think it's really important. And I think, for me, I don't have many men on the podcast. So it's always really refreshing to have a male perspective. Yeah, no, definitely. And just to end, I always have this little, I like to call it a soul to soul message. And it's kind of whatever you feel like based on the conversation or like a message that's inside of you right now that you feel like you want to share just to end.
A rising tide lifts all ships.
Yeah, love it. Love it so much. Thank you so much, Lee, for joining me. And yeah, speak to you soon.
Been a pleasure.
If this episode resonated with you, please do like, follow, and share with someone that you know would benefit. If you're looking to dive in deeper to becoming your most unapologetic, most authentic, shining self, please do head to my website and join my newsletter, where you will find out about all of my upcoming events and speaking opportunities and all of the things that I have going on. And also, if you would like to work with me, please do drop me a DM on any of my socials or through my website. Love and light.